I feel like I haven't seen or talked to Frank Klose in some time, but there he is. He is back. I am back. This is the Sports Bag. The Phillies mailbag is open, answering your Phillies questions. Frank Klose is here. He'll answer your questions, of course, throughout this pennant race, Frank, which when I left, they were like 5 games out, and now they are in both the National League East race and the wild card race. So, Frank, let's get your opinion on, do they have a shot to be in the wild card, or is their best shot still in the National League East?
I still think their best shot's the NL East. If you look at Atlanta, you look at Atlanta's schedule, Atlanta still has some holes. Now, a lot of things have been going right for the Braves, particularly when they acquired Adam Duvall. They remade their entire outfield, if you think about it, adding Peterson and Jorge Soler. They were off to a tremendous start when they first went to Atlanta. They cooled off a little bit. Perhaps the league is getting to see them a little bit more and taking them a little bit more seriously than they did before. But I feel like, Atlanta still has a couple holes, and the Phillies need to keep winning these games that they should be winning, taking some key games from Milwaukee and other teams that are the good teams, quote unquote, on the list still. And they have a real shot to catch up to the Braves. I mean, they're 1.5 back now, and they've played 3 games against the Braves. And, I still tend to think that 3-game series, which is the second to last series the Phillies play this season, is really going to be what decides this division one way or the other.
You got 1.5 back of Atlanta. You are 2 back of the Padres in the National League wild card race. So kind of handicap that wild card race too, and what kind of possibilities. As you said, you think they have a better shot in the East, but it's not outlandish to say they could be a wild card team either, which didn't look realistic about a month ago.
They could. And one interesting thing is the Braves have 4 games left against San Diego, actually 3 plus. They resume a game that they didn't finish in Atlanta, and then they're going to play 3 traditional Padres home games in San Diego. So, if the Braves really sweep the Padres and the Phillies fall behind, then maybe that opens the door for the Phillies to sneak in a little bit in that wild card race. But the thing about the wild card race is there's a lot of teams there. For all we hear about the strength of schedule going forward, the Reds are said to have one of the easiest schedules going forward. They've been flailing a little bit too. The wild card is not the same kind of consolation prize it used to be, because you get that 1-game playoff against the Dodgers or the Giants, which is no cup of tea, and you're kind of fighting to get into the playoffs more than you are in the playoffs. So besides the fact the Phillies could, I guess, supposedly end up in that wild card spot, I think the best thing is to stay focused on this division. That's the true path to the playoffs. And again, with other teams hanging around, you just can't really count on that wild card, in my opinion.
Yeah, that's a great point you make, too, because if you get that wild card, it might feel good for a day, but it's going to be a frivolous honor, most likely, if you get into a 1-game playoff, especially the way the Phillies, Frank, kind of remade their rotation to try to get Wheeler to pitch multiple times if needed down that stretch. There could be a possibility that he needs to go in Miami that final game of the year to get them into the playoffs, and then he's not available to pitch in a 1-game playoff.
Correct, and you're probably looking at Aaron Nola, the way that things kind of shape up. So if the Phillies make the playoffs and they have to use Zach Wheeler on that final game of the season, the playoff rotation likely begins with Aaron Nola. And we know that Aaron Nola has been kind of up and down. So you don't know if that's a good thing or not.
Now, let me ask you this. In your opinion, and obviously they wouldn't say this, but in your opinion, if Gibson pitches better than Nola down the stretch here, would they think about using Gibson instead of Nola?
The way the rotation's lined up, I think that they have to use Nola first.
Okay.
But I think what would have to happen is the Phillies somehow clinch early, and they can set up the rotation the way they want to or play matchups. But I just think that the way that they are right now and the way that things lay out, they're just going to have to pitch Gibson after Nola. So I don't really think that that's an option. But certainly you could say by merit, Gibson has deserved it a little bit more than Nola, and he might be the better chance to win right now, quite honestly.
Yep, I mean, he's done a really good job since he has come over here. Frank Klose covers the Phillies, 97.3 ESPN.com. Let's get into the Phillies mailbag, answering your questions from this week. And first question comes from Kevin. He wants to know about Bailey Falter. What's his long-term, more of a starter, or is he going to be that long man?
Well, I think, unfortunately, that the way that this year played out, Falter really can't be counted on as a starting pitching option heading into next year. He contracted COVID at a pretty tough time. He was about to be named the 5th starter over Vince Velasquez, it sounded like, and Dave Dombrowski admitted as such. And that's when he came down with his COVID infection. And you know what? This is a tough game. You don't get many chances. And that may have been his one chance. He ended up getting a really bad case of COVID, missed a lot of time. And right now, he's only pitched no more than like 20-some pitches at this point. It's very unlikely to see him stretched out for the rest of this season, and less of a chance for him to make an impression to the Phillies to say, hey, I deserve to be considered for a starting spot going into next year. Now, what could happen is, depending on how they set up this rotation going into next year, they could put a few guys to compete for one spot. They like those competitions, even though some people might not have the same kind of chance, and give him the chance to prove himself. But as of now, in terms of who is signed for next year, you have Zach Wheeler, Aaron Nola, Kyle Gibson, Ranger Suarez, Zach Eflin. You don't really have a visible open spot in that rotation. So I think he's going to have to go to spring training either as a guy maybe sort of competing for a job if something opens, or he's going to probably have to take a long man type role and try to show that they can do what they did with Ranger Suarez this year, is that when you have a hole in the rotation, try to plug it internally. So that's going to be a lot harder for him to make that case, given the fact that he missed all this time.
All right, he's an interesting one. Obviously, what happened to Velasquez though? Where is he? Is he still out, hurt? I mean, I know he's not on the major league roster, but is he anywhere?
Yeah, you'll see him soon. He's been in Lehigh Valley most recently. I think they're going to try to pitch him every 5 days. So his last rehab start might be set. See, the minor leagues had all messed up. They had to shut down Reading for a couple days due to a COVID issue. So I don't know if they were going to send him to Reading today because the Iron Pigs are away. So we'll see. Maybe he's with the Iron Pigs. I forget where they are in the road. I think they're in Worcester, Massachusetts. Maybe he'll pitch there. Maybe the COVID situation in Reading threw everything off. But he was getting close to return to the major leagues, and it's not really clear how they're going to use him. But right now the Phillies are rolling with a bullpen game every 5th day. So maybe Velasquez would take part in that.
What do you think about that?
I think it's the only option they have right now. I mean, Matt Moore wasn't getting the job done. They really don't have anybody else to turn to. Zach Eflin's not going to make it back. So, I think they're just trying to do their best with playing matchups against the opponent they have out of the bullpen. And now here's the thing. I will say this. Hector Neris pitched yesterday for the 3rd day in a row, which means he is not going to pitch tonight. So when you have to use the entire bullpen for a game, then you don't have the luxury of bringing Neris in. If Neris didn't pitch 2 days ago because they had a starter, then you might have Neris today. Now you don't have Neris.
Yeah, that was what I was going to bring up in terms of, you're overworking your bullpen, asking them to pitch a whole day, and then, you have to ask them to do their regular job the next day, like yesterday. Now they got out of that situation, but what's left today, we shall see, right?
I assume that other than Matt Moore, who pitched multiple innings, and Neris, I would expect the rest of the bullpen is available today. I guess it depends on how they feel, but it was really, really big. And I tweeted this during the game yesterday, even the first time when they loaded the bases. But it was really important they broke that game open so that they could go to Matt Moore and save the Ian Kennedys and Archie Bradleys and Connor Brogdons for today.
And they did it with the offense, too. As soon as Segura hit the home run, they took Harper out of the on-deck circle and started to get guys a little bit of rest. That's how big yesterday was. Now, Saturday, I guess, was the game where Girardi got a little flack because of the Suarez. Was it Saturday? I'm losing track of the days. Because of Suarez. Suarez is not missing his next start. They tried to say he had some stiffness in his tightness in his forearm after 71 pitches. He was getting a lot of flack because of that.
Well, if it really is the case, and Suarez did disclose something, I guess better safe than sorry. I mean, that move did work out in the end. The bullpen did take care of them. But you know what? We saw with Wheeler being pulled after 6, you need these guys down the stretch. And Ranger Suarez doesn't have a whole lot of innings on his arm as a major league starter. And Zach Wheeler, he has the most innings of his career on his arm right now. And if you don't have these guys down the stretch, then you're not going to make the playoffs. And quite honestly, if your bullpen can't contribute and get some key outs, you're not going to compete anyway, whether they pitch in those games or other games. But my only worry would be the more the bullpen pitches, the thinner it gets.
I want to bounce to this question before we get to another one. Phil wants to know, at what point does Real Muto get called out? He's been kind of pedestrian this season. I know since I've been gone, Hoskins got hurt, and one of the things I recommended in a website post was that you play Real Muto at first and use Marchand almost every day as the catcher to give Real Muto. But, this is something, they signed Real Muto to a pretty big deal for a lot of money, and
So here's the thing. if you look at the WAR, wins above replacement for catchers, he is second. The only one that is has more wins above replacement than he is Will Smith of the Dodgers, who comes in at 3.2. Real Muto is 3.1. So he still is one of the top catchers in the game. Here's where it's kind of hurting him a little bit. The more he doesn't play, the lesser that number is. Now, you go back to 2019 when he had a full season, he was 4.6. So if these little nagging injuries are going to get to him down the stretch in September, we saw a little bit last year, and even the last few games in 2019 he didn't play, then you got to start thinking about doing, as you said, playing him at first base now and then next year, or if there's a DH position. But I think what you need to do is, unfortunately, you got to get him off the catcher position more earlier in the season so that he's not broken down towards the end. Now, 265, not an overwhelming batting average, but it's still, among catchers, he's still one of the top catchers in the league.
Yeah. Do you think, though, he could be an everyday first baseman?
I don't think his value is there if you do that. I think you need to get him behind the plate as much as humanly possible.
So what's Marchand's
figure
future?
Out what next. That's a really good question. That could depend on this offseason. One thing I've always said about Andrew Knapp the last few years is when people complain, I'm like, look, this guy catches less than any backup catcher in baseball. Well, next year, the backup catcher is going to catch more than Andrew Knapp has the last few years, in my estimation, because Realmuto is breaking down a little bit. So I think what you need to do is really consider the position. I think it makes sense to bring Knapp back and keep Marchand in the minors to start the season, because you need a third catcher, not who can just hit, but who can work well with the pitchers. I think Knapp is much better than Marchand at this point in his career working with the pitchers. Of course, Marchand's bat's been a little better in the major leagues, but wasn't that necessarily that strong in the minor leagues either. So I can maximize the value that you have by having all three. Play whoever is the one behind Realmuto more often. And, if you have the DH position, Joe Girardi was famous for making sure to know when to rest Jorge Posada, and by resting, quote unquote, Jorge Posada meant that he gave him DH spots. So I think that if you have a DH next year, which I think is probable, you try to maximize that and take some stress off Realmuto's body whenever you can. And don't wait till the end of the year to do it.
By the way, Phillies and Brewers tonight. Phillies got game one of that series, 12-0. They'll play tonight with Aaron Nola getting a very important start on the mound. Kyle Gibson will go tomorrow. Ranger Suarez for Thursday. Matt Moore is scheduled for Friday, but we think that might be a bullpen game before it gets back to Wheeler. So it's Milwaukee, Colorado, Chicago, New York, Baltimore, Pittsburgh, and then that big series against Atlanta. For more in the mailbag, go to 973ESPN.com at Frank Klose, Klose. That's Frank Klose with a K. And he, like all guests here on the Sports Bash, brought to you by Matt Blatt Kia. Matt Blatt Kia, they want to get you approved today. All right, Frank, thanks, bud.
Always good to talk to you, Mike.
Yeah, man. Phils are still in this thing. Game and a half out of the East, 2 back of the wild card.